On the morning of May 12, 2017, hospitals across England began turning patients away, not because the doctors were gone, but because the computers were. Screens froze, one after another, behind a red window demanding payment. The same red window was appearing on machines at the Spanish telecom Telefónica and at FedEx. The malware had a name, WannaCry. There was also a way to stop it, buried in its own code. Nobody knew that yet, including, by his own account, the man who found it. That same day, a security researcher looked inside the malware's code, noticed it calling out to a web address that didn't exist. A long string of gibberish, unregistered, unowned, and bought it. The spread of that variant stopped. He says it was an accident. 3 months later, the FBI arrested him. Not for WannaCry. This file is about the distance between those two sentences. In this file, a worm loose in a hospital network, a web address made of gibberish, and a man the press was about to call a hero with 3 months left on the clock. This is the file on Marcus Hutchins, the researcher who halted the spread of WannaCry with a single domain registration and who was arrested by the FBI 3 months later. The charges had nothing to do with WannaCry. They had everything to do with who he had been before it. Marcus Hutchins. Online, MalwareTech. In May of 2017, he was a British security researcher, 22 years old. He worked in a corner of the industry most people have not heard of, tracking botnets, networks of infected machines, for a threat intelligence company. His job, in his words, was to look for ways we can track and potentially stop botnets. Part of that work was buying web domains, addresses that malware called out to, registered by researchers so the traffic could be watched and mapped. In the year before WannaCry, by his own count, he had registered several thousand of them. Hold on to that number. It is the difference between how this story was told and what the record shows it to be. On May 12th, as the outbreak spread, a fellow researcher, known by the handle Caffeine, got him a sample of the malware. What Hutchins did with it took, on his telling, almost no thought at all. Understanding what he had done took days. Living with it took 2 years. Here's the file. Per the record, the outbreak began on the 12th of May, 2017. WannaCry was ransomware. It locked the machine's files and demanded payment to release them. What made it different was that it moved by itself. A worm. It spread using an exploit called Eternal Blue, which attacked a flaw in the file sharing protocol built into Microsoft Windows. Here is the detail that should have made WannaCry impossible. Microsoft had already fixed that flaw. The patch shipped in March, 2 months before the outbreak. The machines that fell were, overwhelmingly, the machines that had not been updated. An entire global incident running on a known, closed hole. Where Eternal Blue came from is a claim that carries an asterisk. 2 days into the outbreak, Microsoft's president, Brad Smith, stated on the record that the exploit had been stolen from the NSA and dumped publicly by a group calling itself the Shadow Brokers. The NSA has not confirmed that. What the record documents is that Microsoft said it. The distinction matters on this channel, and we are going to keep making it. The scale in the first days was an estimate. It still is. Europol put it at roughly 200,000 machines across some 150 countries. Cisco's Talos team, in its technical write-up, named Telefónica and FedEx among the victims. And then there was the National Health Service, where the damage was counted precisely, line by line, by the British government's own auditors. We will get to those numbers. They are not the numbers the headlines used. Because inside the code, analysts found one behavior that made no sense at first glance. Before infecting a machine, the worm did something almost polite. It asked the internet a question. If the answer ever came back, it stopped. For the first hours of May 12th, no answer came. The address it was asking for did not exist. The sample reached Hutchins that day by way of caffeine. What happened next, he wrote down himself the following morning in a blog post whose title does most of the work. An account of how to accidentally stop a global cyber attack. I instantly noticed it queried an unregistered domain, which I promptly registered. Promptly. Not because he suspected an off switch, because registering malware domains was the job. The one he had done several thousand times in the previous year. That is the number to hold on to. On the day the world got saved a hero, what the record shows is a professional running a routine. The routine, this time, had consequences nobody had priced in. Hutchins credits a researcher at Proofpoint, Darian Huss, with spotting what the registration had actually done. The domain, once it existed, started answering, and every new copy of WannaCry that asked its question got a reply, and stood down. The spread of that variant halted the same day it began. You do not have to take his word for the effect. The UK's National Audit Office, in its formal investigation of the attack on the NHS, recorded that the spread was stopped when a cyber researcher activated a kill switch. The auditors did not name him. The record confirmed him anyway. Step 1, 2, and 3 were all one and the same. I just didn't know it yet. What the domain check did, in plain language, before running its infection routine, each copy of WannaCry tried to reach one hard-coded web address, that long string of gibberish. If the request failed, the worm proceeded. If the request succeeded, the worm quit. Why would malware carry its own undoing? The popular answer, then and now, a kill switch, an off-ramp its authors built in on purpose. Hutchins' own reading is less cinematic. He argues it was likely a botched anti-analysis trick. Researchers detonate malware inside simulated environments that pretend every web address exists, so a program that finds an unregistered domain suddenly answering can conclude it is being watched and shut itself down. On that theory, the authors built a tripwire against researchers, and one researcher, buying one domain, turned the tripwire against the worm itself. The record leaves this genuinely open. Both readings fit the code. We are not going to resolve it here, and neither, for what it's worth, has he. Talos's technical write-up and Hutchins' own post are the sources. Within days, the press needed a word for what he had done. The word they reached for was saved. The record needed a different one. The hacker who saved the internet. That phrase, it ran as a headline, and it spawned a genre. Save the NHS. Save the world. Saved is doing 3 jobs the evidence won't pay for. Here is the bounded version, the one the record supports. The sinkhole stopped new spread of that variant. Hutchins said so himself in the same post in 5 words. It only stops this sample. Machines already infected stayed infected. Unpatched machines stayed exposed. And the National Audit Office found that between May and September of 2017, after the kill switch, 92 more NHS organizations contacted that domain. The fix was a halt, not a cure. And the halt came too late to be painless. Per the National Audit Office, at least 81 of England's 236 hospital trusts were affected, 603 NHS organizations in all, roughly 19,000 medical appointments cancelled. Every one of those appointments was a person, someone's scan, someone's surgery console, pushed into the dark on a Friday morning because of a worm and a missing patch. That is the ledger this story sits on. A clever ending does not zero it out. Hutchins, to his credit on the record, kept pointing the spotlight elsewhere, at the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, at the FBI and Shadow Server, and Microsoft's emergency response. Microsoft, for its part, took the unusual step of shipping fixes even for Windows versions it no longer supported. The rescue, such as it was, had many hands. So, not saved. Stopped. That variant, that spread, that weak. It is a smaller word, It happens to be the true one. Which leaves the larger question standing. Somebody wrote this thing. Somebody released it into hospital networks. The answer, when governments began giving it, took a year, 2 capitals, and a criminal complaint, and it is still formally an allegation. In December of 2017, both Washington and London publicly blame North Korea for WannaCry. 6 months later, the accusation acquired a court file. In a criminal complaint dated June 8, 2018, U.S. prosecutors allege that the attack was carried out by North Korea's Lazarus Group, and they charged one named man, a North Korean programmer called Park Jin-hyuk. The Lazarus Group is the name prosecutors and researchers use for a hacking operation the United States attributes to the North Korean state. Notice every verb in that sentence doing careful work. Attributes. Alleges. On this channel, a state actor attribution keeps its tier marker no matter how many headlines drop it. Because a complaint documents the allegation, it does not prove it. What that filing establishes is that the United States formally accused, nothing more. The accusation has not been tested in a courtroom because the man it names has not been in one. North Korea, for its part, denied any involvement. That denial is part of this record too. Between those two positions, the public record simply holds its breath. As for Park Jin-hyuk, he was charged. He was not arrested. He has not been in U.S. custody. Not then, not since. The American record loses track of him at the border of the allegation, and so does this file. What we don't know yet includes where that man is. But by the time that complaint was filed, an arrest connected to this story had already happened, 10 months earlier in Nevada. The man taken into custody was not a North Korean operative. It was Marcus Hutchins. Rewind to July 11th, 2017, 2 months, almost to the day, after the sinkhole. A federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Wisconsin returned an indictment against Hutchins. 6 counts. Under seal, which means, among other things, that its subject does not get told. He spent that July as the most celebrated name in his field, with a federal case number already attached to it. The applause in the indictment ran on parallel tracks for 3 weeks. In late July, he flew to Las Vegas. According to press accounts, he spent the week around DEF CON, the annual hacker conference, and was at the Las Vegas airport heading home when agents took him. What the court record documents is narrower and firmer. Arrested in Nevada on or about August 2nd, 2017. The airport, the timing against the conference, that choreography is reported. The handcuffs are documented. On August 14th, he was arraigned and pleaded not guilty. And here the record preserves a small human detail. Court records show that Tara Wheeler, a security researcher, a peer, posted his $30,000 bail, her own money on the line, for a colleague most of the world had met 11 weeks earlier as a headline. The community he came from did not wait for the verdict to decide what it thought. So what were the 6 counts about? Not WannaCry. The charges concerned a piece of banking malware called Kronos. Malware built not to lock hospitals, but to quietly steal from bank customers, and, per the indictment, connected to Marcus Hutchins. An indictment, remember, is an accusation. He denied it, formally, with that not guilty plea. In June of 2018, the government raised the stakes. A superseding indictment, 10 counts now. 10 counts which, with their statutory maximum stacked end to end, carried, in theory, decades of exposure. In practice, nobody could say. Federal cases are not sentenced by stacking maximums, and this one was a long way from sentencing. What the record shows in the meantime is a man out on a peer's bail money, waiting. 10 federal counts. A defendant the internet had spent the summer calling a hero. It took nearly 2 years to find out which of those 2 facts would weigh more. Per the record, On May 2, 2019, Marcus Hutchins pleaded guilty to 2 counts. Count 1, conspiracy under Title 18, Section 371. Count 2, advertising or selling a device for intercepting communications under Section 2512. Both concerned Kronos. With that plea, the man who stopped WannaCry's spread admitted in federal court to his role in someone else's losses. How far back did that role go? He began writing malware as a teenager. That part is his own account, carried by Wired's reporting. Kronos itself came later. It launched in 2014, when he was no longer a teenager, around 20. The court record does not put an age on any of it. We flag the distinction and move on. And the other 8 counts? Dismissed. All of them. Not proven, not tried. The 2 admitted counts are the entire extent of what the record establishes against him. And this file will not imply an inch more than that. Consider what the sentencing judge was handed. Judge J.P. Statmuller of the Eastern District of Wisconsin had in front of him a 10-count federal prosecution whose defendant the world had spent a summer calling a hero, and whose plea, by the time it reached his courtroom, covered 2 counts of it. Every choice about what that was worth now came down to 1 docket entry. Sentencing came on July 26, 2019. The sentence? Time served plus 1 year of supervised release. The fine? Waived. A $200 special assessment. No prison. Judgment entered 3 days later. That October, his supervision was transferred to California, and there, as far as the court file is concerned, the record goes quiet. What we know, plainly stated, Marcus Hutchins admitted in federal court to his role in the Kronos offense. That is documented by his own plea. And Marcus Hutchins halted the spread of WannaCry. That is documented too, by government auditors who did not even know his name when they wrote it down. Both sentences are true at once. The headlines could only hold one at a time. Hero in May, criminal in August. The courtroom was the one place both had to be weighed together. Its answer, entered on the record on July 29, 2019, was time served. Not the hacker who saved the internet. Something the record supports, and stranger, a man who wrote malware in 1 decade on his own account and stopped a worm in the next, by accident, on his own account, and stood in front of a federal judge as both of those people at once. The distance between the accident and the arrest was 3 months. The distance between who he had been and who he says he became, that one the record leaves open. That's the file. The sources are in the description, every court filing, document, and primary article we used. If you want to audit the work, you can. If you want the next file when it opens, subscribe. Closing the file.